Good morning. I am Cesar Perales, and I have the honor of serving as Secretary of State of New York. Thank you all for joining us on this very auspicious occasion. After I've made a few brief remarks, you will hear from Chung-Wha Ha, who's the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition. You will hear from Assemblyman Felix Ortiz, Senator Gustavo Rivera, and Governor Andrew Cuomo. I know many of you in the room, we've been advocates for years together, but some of you don't know that for years I served as a civil rights lawyer. That was my first calling before I went to government. And I recall one of the first lawsuits I brought. It was in 1974. And the defendant was the state of New York. Senator Levine of the, it wasn't Senator, it was Commissioner Levine of the New York State Department of Social Services. And I brought that case on behalf of a group of Puerto Rican women who were seeking public assistance and had faced many, many obstacles in trying to get their entitlements. And perhaps the worst of it was that what the Department of Social Services would do would be to ask them to bring their own interpreter. And who did they bring? They brought their kids. And what would happen was that these kids served as interpreters and had to explain to the people in the Department of Social Services why their mother could not provide them with enough food and clothing that they needed the assistance of the state. This was, to me, one of the greatest indignities I had seen. And so together with a number of other lawyers, we brought this lawsuit. And believe it or not, the state of New York resisted. They resisted for years. And all that was being requested was that one language, Spanish, be used in a few of their forms, and that Spanish-speaking people be hired to work as translators. I have never forgotten the discussions I had with these women. But today, this is a special day. This is a day in which we're going to hear the governor of the state of New York explain that he is living up to a promise he made a few months ago at the Somos conference, a promise in which he made that he would be sure that that kind of indignity would never occur in this state, and that all New Yorkers would have the ability to access services even if they didn't speak English well. He promised specifically that state agencies would be accessible to all New Yorkers. I'm proud to say that today you'll see him deliver on his promise, a promise made to 2.5 million New Yorkers who don't use English as their primary language. The governor is taking steps to ensure that these individuals will have access to the same state services, the same grants, the same support tools that all New Yorkers are entitled to. The executive order that the governor is signing today will, for the first time in New York history, ensure that state agencies will that provides direct services must provide free interpretation and translation services for the top 6 non-English languages spoken in New York. These languages are Spanish, Chinese, Italian, Russian, French, and French Creole. Once the order is signed, state agencies will have 1 year to provide these services on a rolling basis. That means that as they become ready, they will implement the services. We will not have to wait the entire year. And at the same time, in the future, any other documents that are produced will be produced not just in English, but in all of these languages. The governor's website itself will be translated into the 6 languages. I'd now like to introduce an old and dear friend, an advocate that I have long respected on behalf of immigrants, Chung-Wha Hong of the New York Immigration Coalition.
Thank you, Cesar. Good morning. My name is Chung-Wha Hong. I'm the director of the New York Immigration Coalition, and we're made up of 200 organizations throughout the state that work with the wonderful, diverse immigrant communities all over. I am extremely happy to be here. I have to say, last year, our organization brought 750 people to Albany, and we had our Albany Immigrants Day. And one of the top things that we asked the governor for was a language access policy. Now, but that wasn't the first time we had asked the state government for language access policy. 15 years ago, there was about 10 of us who traveled to Albany. So we went from 10 to 750. It took over a decade for us to get to this place so that we finally have something that offers 2.5 million New Yorkers who are still learning English, but who need to be part of our communities and who want to be contributing to our economy and to our state. And that's why this executive order will be a direct pathway and a facilitator of immigrant communities giving the most that they can to revitalize and strengthen our state. But I want to say that equality, this is equal access, does not happen by default. It happens bottom up from the grassroots communities, and it happens with leadership from top down. And so that is why we had the perfect combination of bottom up and top down, and that's why we have this day and this signing ceremony. Because we had the partnership between communities on the ground who know that it's not, that it's about 2 things: equality for New Yorkers on the one hand, and efficiency for government and on the other. And unless our government is efficient and everybody's participating, we are not going to go anywhere as a state. And so this policy is a really important one that helps not only immigrants, but it'll be good for all of us. And so millions of people will have better access to the wonderful and critical services that New York State has to offer to its residents. I also want to say in a concrete sort of way that we're so proud because this policy, if you compare it to what's going on in the rest of the country, is a comprehensive policy in scope of what it covers, and it has a timetable, and it has an implementation plan. So it's a very strong policy that immigrant communities are very happy to back and support. So with that, I'd like to thank a few people who helped to get us all here today. Cesar Perales, of course, we heard from. Thank you so much for that. And the legislators have been a real force behind this, backing the governor. So we have Senator Rivera and Assemblyman Ortiz, but I also want to thank Grace Meng, and then Assemblyman Guillermo Linares, and Phil Ramos, and I know everybody will get recognized, Procrastini, so I wanted to thank all of you. But most of all, I want to thank my colleagues and organizations who work together with us. And they are, and please stand up for like 1 second, Make the Road New York, Theo, Minkwon Center for Community Action, JSUP, NILPI, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, and Empire Justice Center. Thank you. And so I speak with the power and authority of all those wonderful organizations and the 4 million immigrants who are looking forward to making this executive order work and making our lives dedicated to the prosperity of entire New York State. So, Governor, thank you so much. Oh, and I'm supposed to like to introduce Assemblyman Feliz Ortiz to give his remarks. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, Governor. This is a really historical moment for all the people of the state of New York, from Buffalo all the way down to Long Island. Today, the people of this state are very pleased and very happy that they are seeing a real change. This executive order is really open government and civic life to millions of New Yorkers around the state, enable people to participate in all levels of government, and ensure that they can have access to resources in our state government. It was about time. As we work to restore New York as a pillar of prosperity, it is important that we remove all barriers to those who will want to live and do business here, and this is a good public economic policy. We live in a global economy, and many people look at New York as a place to come, to grow and to thrive, and to have dreams, and to make their life here in New York. This is not only for a day-to-day interaction for the state, but it's specifically important for emergencies. We just saw what happened after the recent flood that tackled New York State. Many residents throughout the state who did not speak English. Some of those residents was in disadvantage on getting resources, on getting information, and they had a hard time to communicate at some point or another to have access to resources that we offer to help them in the state of New York. Now we can help them more efficiently because the governor is making this happen. Governor, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Puerto Rican and Hispanic Task Force, on behalf of all the members, for making this a wonderful historical day, not only for the Hispanic community, but for all the 6 languages that has been addressed very seriously through your administration. We really applaud you. We applaud the Secretary of State and other folks who have worked so hard from, like Ms. Sean said, from the bottom to the top, and for your leadership. And was about time that we have a leadership that will take charge to make sure that New Yorkers will recognize the importance of languages in our state. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Senator Gustavo Rivera.
Good morning. Buenos dias. It is my pleasure to be here today to celebrate, as Assemblymember Ortiz says, a very historic day in the state of New York. We are a very diverse state. We're a state that is driven by a very diverse population, by a very active immigrant population of all stripes from all over the world. And what we're doing here today is we're providing access to them. To speak of equality, we have to speak of access. And when it comes to government services, what we are doing here today is allowing everyone, regardless of what language they speak, to be able to access government services, to be able to access the government that works for them. Now, whether you are an elderly person that is looking for medical care, whether you are a domestic violence victim, whether you are somebody who is unemployed, you need to be able to access government services. And what this will do is it will allow you, regardless of the language that you speak, to be able to do that. Estoy aquí para celebrar al gobernador Cuomo y decir claramente que esto es un día histórico para nuestro estado, porque en un estado que es tan diverso, que tiene comunidades inmigrantes de todos los países del mundo, es necesario que todo el mundo pueda accesar los servicios al gobierno, sean personas que sean víctimas de violencia doméstica, personas que no tengan trabajo, tienen la necesidad de accesar al gobierno, y esto les va a dar la oportunidad. So without further ado, I would like for all of us to welcome Governor Cuomo. Por favor, denos la bienvenida al gobernador Cuomo.
Buongiorno. Questo è un giorno importante perché io parlo italiano, and now I can understand what my government is speaking about. First, to Secretary of State Cesar Perales, who's worked on this issue for many, many years. Let's give him a round of applause. Senator Gustavo Rivera and Assemblyman Felix Ortiz, thank you very much for being with us. Let's give them a round of applause. Chung Wah Hong and your entire coalition. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here and for your good work. We have a number of our colleagues and my partners from the legislature who are here today, and the legislature has sponsored a number of bills that would accomplish this goal, and they've been fighting this fight for many, many years. We're going to be accomplishing the goal by executive order, but it was inspired by many years of struggle and a lot of good work by the legislators who are here today, and I just want to thank them and acknowledge them. Assemblymember Camara is here, Assemblymember Meng, Assemblymember Brooke Krasny, Assemblymember Linares, Assemblymember Moya, Assemblymember Ramos, Assemblymember Nick Perry. Why don't you stand and let's give them a round of applause, and thank you all very much for being here. The message today is amazingly simple. If there is any news in today, it's the acknowledgement that sometimes it takes government so long to accomplish an obvious purpose and to remedy an obvious injustice. The government works for the people. Government serves the people. It's paid for by the people. It's empowered by the people. It needs to communicate with the people. These are vital services by definition. It's the essence of what we do, whether it's health services, whether it's food stamps, whether it's income benefits, flood, as Assemblymember Ortiz just mentioned. We have people in emergency situations who, whether or not they can access government and understand the service, could be the difference between life and death. Clearly, the government has to make sure it can communicate with the people. And for many, many years, we assumed in New York State government that it was up to the person to figure out how to communicate with government. No. The roles are reversed. It's government's responsibility to figure out how to communicate with the person. Government serves the person. The person doesn't serve the government, especially in New York. Statue of Liberty is in our harbor. The whole premise was we welcome people from all over the globe. That is our pride. That is our joy. That's the basis for our society. Certainly, then, this government is going to be able to communicate with the diversity that we invited here. It is staggering when you think about it, how long the struggle went on. That Cesar Perales had to file a lawsuit to bring attention to it. And then you went for decades without accomplishing it. Well, today we bring a little bit of justice, a little bit more justice to the state of New York, and it's my pleasure. When I was Attorney General, we brought a case against private sector companies, pharmacy companies, on the theory that they should have language access because they were dealing with the public, they were selling drugs, they were filling prescriptions, and the theory of my action was the pharmacies had a duty to translate the medicine prescriptions, the directions, into different languages, because how could they be dealing with the public and not be communicating with the public? Well, if it's true for a private sector company, it is certainly true for a government. And that is the action we take today. Again, I want to applaud the groups, the advocacy groups. I want to applaud the members who fought this fight for many, many years. And it truly is my honor as governor of the state of New York to sign an executive order that will have vital services provided by this state government translated by 27 agencies into 6 languages to make sure we're serving the people. It's our fundamental obligation. I'd ask you to join me up here now, the elected members in Chawang-Hang, to sign the executive order. Any questions? Let's stay on this topic first.
Over the years, when these types of measures have been proposed, critics have complained that it would prove a disincentive for immigrants to learn English, going through the system. Do you see it that way, or?
I see the theoretical argument, Ken. I think it is grossly outweighed by the benefit. I mean, just when you think about it, I don't think it's even a close call. People are trying to access vital services and they can't understand the language, So I don't think there is any argument close that balances the injustice that was done.
How much this will cost, and at the time when you're asking your agencies to cut back 10%, how are they going to be able to do this?
Yeah. A big piece of this, Eric, is going to be paid for by federal funds. Beyond that, we estimate the cost to be about $1.5 million. And we're going to be executing it on an agency-by-agency plan. So we'll work with each agency. What information do they need to communicate? What needs to be printed? What should be in a booklet? What can be done on the website? Obviously, with the websites now and the new technology, it makes this task a lot easier. It's one thing to translate it and put it up on a website. In the old days, you had to print numerous pieces of paper.
Come from, or is it already budgeted at this point?
It's going to be in the state budget. The state budget is $137 billion. We're going to find the money to do this.
Governor, can you talk about the translation services in terms of do agencies have to now have new staff who can speak these 6 languages, or how's that being worked?
Translation services will be, remember what this is, basically forms and vital documents. The state does have the capacity, the expertise to translate into the 6 languages that we're speaking about today.
But it's also, I'm sorry, Governor, it's also hiring, right? It's interpreters, free interpreter services?
I don't know that we're hiring additional people. No, we're not.
So
I was just educated on that question.
I'm just looking at the press release, then are you saying that these are people, you already have people on staff who can speak these languages?
Yes.
So it's not an additional cost?
Right.
About that. As the governor pointed out, technology makes things a lot easier, and part of what we're doing is we're going to have a contract with a company that you can call. If someone comes in, for example, speaking Korean or other languages beyond the 6, you can actually call an agency and they'll have an interpreter on the phone within a matter of moments that can interpret that capacity. So it's really much easier to do today than it could have been done years ago.
I was wondering if you see the contrast between what's going on here and what's going on in the state of Alabama, where they're cracking down on immigrants. Are you trying to send some kind of message here?
Karen, it's not, the New York experience, I don't think, needs to be juxtaposed against any other state or any other place. I know that we welcome immigration here, that we are, most of us are immigrants. It's what made this state the greatest state in the country. We're proud of it. We've never been intimidated by it. We've never been frightened. We're the exact opposite. We open our arms and we invite people here and we invite them to join the family of New York, and we always have. So to the extent we can expedite and facilitate communication among our family members, that's exactly what we want to do.
Follow-up, would undocumented immigrants be able to avail themselves of the
It
service?
depends on the service, but the language would make it available.
Does this extend to does this extend to bills if you go out to like this, to the assembly or senate?
Does it apply to the legislature? I believe this is just the executive. Is that right? Just the executive.
Governor, just to follow up, the Secretary of State mentioned there's a contract with a company that can provide these services. The $1 million cost you estimated, does that include this contract? Is it a new contract? Maybe Mr. Perales can answer
I
that.
believe so, yes.
The answer is yes.
Existing contracts.
Existing contract.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Anything else, anything off topic? If you want to run for the hills now, you can, my friend. Now is the time to take your exit if I were you.
PEP said that their executive board has come up with some changes, tweaks to the agreement with you that's been sent back to your office. Do you have any comment on that? Have you seen that information yet?
The PEP situation is a very serious situation. primarily, in my opinion, because it deals with the families and lives of 3,500 people. And I have said that lines of communication are open. They have been open. They'll remain open. If there's any way that we can avoid 3,500 layoffs, that is what my administration wants to do. As I said, we need a revenue-neutral way to do it because we need the savings, and we've needed the savings from January. And that was clear all through the budget process. But in many ways, it's up to PEF. It is up to PEF. They know the numbers, and if there's a way that we can hit those numbers, and we're consistent with the other terms, then great.
Have you seen this information from them, and based on that, do you foresee that we could hold off these layoffs?
I have not, I know there's communication that's going on. We didn't negotiate in the newspapers the first time and on this contract or any other contract, by the way, and we're not going to start now. I know the lines of communication are open. I know people are acting professionally. I know everyone wants to get to yes if you can. I know we're not there yet. We're going ahead with the layoffs in the meantime, but I'm hopeful. And I think in many ways it is up to PEF. You know, nothing changed here. We had the numbers in January, and we knew what the numbers were, and the numbers haven't changed. So it is up to PEF. It's literally the decision of the leadership, and then as we learned the hard way, it's the decision of the membership.
Governor, would you consider shortening the contract to be revenue neutral?
What does that mean?
In other words, dropping one of the, as PEP describes it, onerous elements of the contract is the 5-year length. Would you be willing to roll that back? I know you don't want to negotiate in public, but on the question of whether or not it would be revenue neutral, would you consider that to be in that category?
Well, the revenue neutral, remember the revenues that are critical are the immediate revenues, right? Revenues 5 years down the road we're working on, but a lot's going to happen in 5 years, especially with this economy. We're talking about this year, next year, year 3. These are key years for us. And that's where the revenue neutral means this year, next year, the year after primarily. And as you said, Casey, I don't want to negotiate in public, but we have been reasonable and flexible all through this. I think that has been made clear by the fact that the same contract was ratified by CSEA. And CSEA is a larger union, and the management and the leadership of CSEA is aggressive and expert and national in caliber. So we went through it once with CSEA. The contract was ratified. So I think that vindicates the reasonableness of our position.
Governor, to what extent, if any, do you identify with this newly emergent Occupy Wall Street movement? And just related to that, are you concerned at all that the Occupy Wall Street movement is demonizing a very important industry for New York, Wall Street?
I think protest, Fred, has historically been an important part of our democracy. And to the extent this is a vent for frustration and anger at the current circumstances, I think a lot of people understand that, right? The economy is not doing well. A lot of people are feeling the pain. And when people are feeling pain, they look for an outlet. And I think that's what you're hearing on the protest, from the protesters. There are also a number of voices, it appears, within the protesters. I haven't spoken to them personally, but you have people who are against the death penalty, income inequality, lack of jobs. So you have a number of messages coming out. But the voices that are frustrated with the lack of jobs, look, we understand that. That's why we're working so hard in this state to do economic development, to create jobs. The frustration with unemployment, I think everyone can understand that. And then the vehicle itself, the protest, that's what people do at different times.
The question of Wall Street itself, which lastly do generate something like 20% of the income for the state, are you concerned that there are institutions down there being demonized unfairly?
Well, look, Fred, no one has been more aggressive on Wall Street than I have, right? I was Attorney General for 4 years. And I was very aggressive in the cases we brought, and the actions we brought, and the theories that we pursued up and down Wall Street. At the same time, it is a major economic engine for this state. You know, all said and told, 20–25% of the state's income comes from Wall Street. So there has to be a balance. From a state perspective, there's a balance. We want fairness, we want justice. Certainly, and to the extent there were bad acts, we want them punished on Wall Street and anywhere else. At the same time, it's a major economic engine for this state.
Governor, have all 3,500 F layoff notices now been issued?
Yes, I believe so.
Is there any update on the taxi bill and whether or not you're any closer to a compromise deal?
The taxi bill, Ken, we were just chatting about inside. I don't think there has been any bill, believe it or not, that has generated more protests, speaking of protest, in front of the New York City governor's office than the taxi bill. I hold some of the people who were with me directly responsible, by the way, but that's a different topic.
Aggressive in
Yeah.
putting forward the argument for passage of it. Do you draw a distinction there with tech? Maybe they didn't do the job to get it passed?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Let me just finish Ken's point quickly. I understand the goal of the legislation, and I think there are worthwhile goals on the taxi legislation. It would raise $1 billion in revenues for New York City. That's important. It would increase access for the disabled. That's important. It would get cab service, street hails to the outer boroughs. I'm a Queens boy originally. I understand how hard it is to get a cab in Queens or Brooklyn or the Bronx. So that's a major benefit. I understand the goals. We're going to work very hard to try to reach a better solution than we have in the bill. I believe the percentage of access for the disabled, for example, should be increased. I believe that's an important piece that should be changed. And there's unhappiness among many different groups. So to the extent we can sit down and work it through and come up with a bill that reaches those goals but reduces the hardship, that's my goal.
This has been being discussed now since June. I'm just curious if there's been any movement.
There has been movement. Are we there yet? No. And you know my speech about Albany in progress. You know, until you're there, you're not there. But do we have a resolution to the matter? No. On CSEA and PEF, we worked both with CSEA and PEF, as you know. I don't want to comment on internal procedures within CSEA or PEF. I think that's their business. Obviously, we had a very different outcome. The CSEA membership ratified the vote of the CSEA leadership. The PEF membership rejected the vote of the PEF leadership. But that's, beyond that, I have no comment.
There's a internal report from the Department of Health that was written about today that found more resources will be needed if fracking permits are issued. Your DEC commissioner was testifying before, and Assembly panel today reiterated that more resources are needed for his agency as well. Would you consider adding more resources, shifting more money in your upcoming budget to possibly deal with the potential for fracking?
Yeah. First, on the Department of Health, the MRT process is going along, as many of you know, and the MRT process, all the reports are the amount of savings that we had anticipated are on schedule. So that's the main finding from the Department of Health, and that's very, very big and important news. If, right? If you were going to do fracking, and if the EC says the report comes out that we should do fracking, then would you put in place the resources and safeguards you need to do fracking? Of course.
Governor, some state lawmakers and counties continue to push for the state to pick up the local share of Medicaid costs. Is that something that's feasible?
If we find several $100 million, it's feasible.
But the cost is something like $2 billion. They want it to be over a period of years. They're saying that it's a state program, the state should pay for it. Is that something that the state
Yeah,
can take?
well, they want it phased in over a number of years, and it would take several $100 million per year. Look, I understand that the local governments are saying that their budgets are tight, and that money is tight. I understand that when a town says that, or a village says that, or a county says that. I understand it because I know it on the state level. We don't have any revenue sources that are coming into the state different than revenue sources that are coming into local governments. And by the way, the taxpayer feels it too. It's the same song being sung by everyone. It's the same song being sung by the young people down on Wall Street, right? The jobs aren't being created, the economy is tight. I understand it. Well, the state should pick up Medicaid. I could sit here and say the federal government should pick up my costs. And the federal government would say, that's a nice idea, but we don't have the money either. It's a function of the overall economy. And everybody has to recalibrate and everybody has to make it work. The Medicaid, the state capped their increase in cost to 3%, right? So the state took a major step forward in alleviating some of the cost. But do we have money to subsidize them? No.
Governor, a couple of weeks ago, your housing commissioner pleaded guilty to a DWI offense, and you had said you wanted to look at it before deciding whether to take subsequent action. Have you taken any other action?
We have taken no other action. The court took an action that they deemed appropriate, and we'll leave it with the judge's determination.
Governor, a few days ago, Charles Gasparino, a Wall Street financial writer, predicted that Wall Street bonuses this January could be down 50% from last year. Have you been updated at all on projections of deficits for the new budget, which at last we knew were projected at about $2 billion? They're getting worse.
When we closed the budget, we anticipated about a $2 billion shortfall, $2 billion deficit next year when we concluded this year's budget, if you will. That then raised the question of what does the economy do between then and next year. Initially, earlier in the year, there was an uptick, actually, and the collections were running ahead of schedule. That has reversed, and the collections are behind schedule. So at this point, and again, we can have fits and starts, Fred, between now and January and forward, but the state collections reflect what is happening nationwide, what people are feeling. The economy is slowing down, and we see that in our collections.
I think he was asking about Wall Street bonuses, and you know better than anybody that if Wall Street's not doing well, we in New York are hurt disproportionately compared with the rest of the nation. So I would ask, in terms of the anticipated revenues coming from Wall Street, are you particularly worried in view of what Fred was just asking?
Yes. Yes, and look, let's put it all together. Joe Spector says the local governments are asking, can you pick up more money? Can you pick up some of their receivables? Can you share the local government's cost? We closed this year's budget. My partners in the legislature here with me today, we closed the budget, we were anticipating a $10 billion deficit. Then it depended on what the economy was going to do. The economy is slowing, and people are now suggesting it may be especially slow on Wall Street, which we are heavily reliant on. We already see the collections slowing. So yes, we are worried that the state deficit, which was projected to be $2 billion, is at this rate going to be $2 billion. If anything, could be more. Does that cause me to worry? Worry is a relative term, doesn't make me happy. And yes, it would be a problem for the state. So we're certainly not in a position to be picking up any additional costs since we need $2 billion just to get back to zero.
In that regard, there's still a sentiment in the legislation that the state should not allow the millionaire's tax or the so-called millionaire's tax to expire because you're thinking on that change given these new economic circumstances.
You know, Glenn, I've said all along, and I think it's almost, well, you can argue about anything. The federal government is proposing to raise taxes. I've said The federal government is in a different position than the state government fundamentally. Why? Because we are in a competition that they are not in, on one level. We are competing with New Jersey, and we're competing with Connecticut, and we're competing with Massachusetts, and we're competing with Pennsylvania. And when you look at the borders of this state, you can see that we literally hemorrhage and bleed people into the surrounding states. Why? Because if you can, people will move to pay less taxes. So we have to be very aware of that. And that is a major factor for us. Is it determinative? Not necessarily, but it is a major factor that you are competing with these other states. And what is Jersey doing, and what is Connecticut doing, and what is Massachusetts doing, and what are you doing relative to them in that competitive environment? And if a business can move to Connecticut versus Manhattan, or Pennsylvania versus Binghamton, we have to be aware of that. If you raise taxes in that situation, it could have a negative net effect for the state. I believe that. That's not true federally. Now, people will say, well, they'll go to another country, or they won't bring their assets here, which may be valid, by the way. But it is a different calculus than the state has. And I believe that New York has been in a precarious position. We are known as the high-tax state. And if you continue to raise taxes, net it will cost you more.
The Assembly recently said that after this year's budget, he doesn't see a reason that you're going to need to cut more next year. Do you agree with that assessment?
Meaning what, Ken? Cut more what? We have the speaker.
Education, the big areas of the budget.
Well, the speaker knows. My partners in the legislature know. We closed the budget. We had a $2 billion shortfall. As we discussed at length, that shortfall hasn't gone away. If anything, it might be worse. We are going to need to close a $2 billion hole for next year. Now, compared to what we did last year, we closed a $10 billion hole last year. You know, at one time, $2 billion would have been a staggering deficit. In light of closing at $10 billion, $2 billion sounds relatively manageable. It's not good, but it is manageable.
But that $2 billion includes, I think it's 4% increases in education and healthcare spending. Do you see a need to reduce those increases, or do you think that's a possibility that you're going to have to reduce those projected increases?
Well, that's going to be the discussion next year. Let's find out what the numbers are before we have that conversation, because otherwise you need two levels of speculation. If the revenues were this, then what would you do with the expense side? Let's find out what the revenues are. Let's find out what the $2 billion is. Is it $2 billion? Is it 2.5? Is it 1.5? Let's find out what the numbers are, and then we'll decide.
Governor, County Executive Breslin is proposing a budget that would have a tax increase of about 10 times the property tax cap bill that you signed. Does that concern you? Is that something that anyone foresaw when you were putting that legislation together?
It would concern me if I was a resident of the county. It would concern me if I was paying the bill. Look, the way the tax cap works is this. There's been stories, well, people are despite the state tax cap. There's no despite the state tax cap. What we said is, we passed a law that establishes a 2% cap, or whatever the people want. Or whatever the people want. That's what the law says. The law says whatever the people want. So, if the Albany County Executive, and I don't know the facts, and it's not my place, if the Albany County Executive says, look, here's our situation. We want to do this, we want to build this, we had a problem, we have an immediate need, and we need to raise taxes to 4, 5, 6, 7%, whatever it is, and the people of the county say yes, God bless them. Fine.
There's no vote of the people of the county, it's through a county legislature.
Or 60% of the board. Fine. Fine. We have never dictated to anyone what the taxes should be. What we have said is this. When you look at the past, property taxes have been going up astronomically. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said they're forcing me to sell my house, they're forcing me to move out of the state, my taxes are higher than my mortgage. And this mentality of automatic pilot, where the property taxes just keep going up 5, 6, 7% every year, when, by the way, nothing in anybody's life is going up at that rate. Their income isn't going up at that rate, the value of their home isn't going up at that rate, but the local governments just almost on automatic pilot keep raising. That has to stop. That has to stop. So to the extent the state law said, let's pay attention, let's start with a number, 2%, and then let's have a really engaged, informed conversation on the local level. What you're seeing this year, which you didn't see in years past, there is much more attention and discussion about the increases in the property tax. That is a great accomplishment and a great positive. Because I believe in democracy. And I believe that when people are paying attention and asking questions, that's a good thing. By the way, I'm going to be doing more things on the property taxes to inform people and educate them and stimulate the conversation. You wouldn't have asked the question before. You wouldn't have noticed. So to the extent we're having the dialogue, it is a good thing. But, well, the state said it should be 2%. Not true. Not true. Well, you want 2%. No. As a matter of fact, if you ask me my opinion, I want 0. I'm in favor of rebates. I'd like to see the government giving back more money. Thanks. Nice to see you. Pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure.